So good morning, Wayne and June. Thanks for joining us here
Good morning.
today.
Good morning, June, Jordan.
This will be for our Throwback Thursday, so we're excited to talk about the old times with TIP and how things really got started and kind of where they are today. So Wayne, I'll start with you. If you want to introduce yourself officially and who you are, that would be great.
Sure. My name's Wayne Fortin. I'm a mental health person by profession. Worked in mental health for probably 40 or 50 years. 35 years ago, I was involved in founding the TIP program. So I guess my most important role, as I see it, is the founder of TIP. I live down here in Vista, California with my wife, and I'm still involved in TIP in some ways. And so that's who I am.
Great, thank you. Okay, June.
My name's June Vining, and I am one of the founding volunteers of TIP in the Portland, Oregon area, and just celebrated 28 years with TIP. So, and I think if you, we're virtually in the same room, but Wayne and I could probably talk TIP stories. It's our favorite thing to talk about forever. So we're excited to be here.
Great, good. Okay, so Wayne, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us the story of how TIP was born?
Sure. I was working at an outpatient county mental health clinic, seeing patients, doing therapy, and to make a long story short, I saw a need. I heard what we today call the second injury. I was hearing that over and over again from my clients, meaning that they were saying, this bad thing happened to me, and then I felt I wasn't treated right by the system. So by the time I saw people, it was little I could do with that second injury. So I saw a need over and over again. And I just began wondering, gee, can anything be done to prevent this second injury, to make things go better on the scene? Meanwhile, our facility was right across the street from the Oceanside Police Department. And I developed over probably 5 years before TIP even started, a relationship with the police. So they were calling me out into crisis situations, and a strong relationship developed between myself and the police. So that was the opportunity. So I saw the need, and I saw the opportunity to work with the police. And the basic idea was, and it still is today, so simple. The police could call us out into these tragic crisis situations, and we could help prevent that second injury. So the way I like to describe it, Jordan, the founding of TIP is a need, a perceived need, came together with an opportunity. I think if that relationship with the police hadn't developed, it would just stay an idea. Gee, there's a need, but what can I do about it? But with the police partnership, it took off. So that was back in 1985, and we started small, started in one city, and it's gradually grown since then.
Great, thank you. Geez, so 35 years later this year, huh?
Yes.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
I mean, it's just, we're just all very proud. You should be proud. June should be proud. It's just been June's been involved from the get-go, not only with Portland, but with establishing our national organization. So yeah, 35 years is a long time.
It is a long time.
I mean, for a small business, really. So
yes.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Wayne, I know you mentioned kind of how you started, but what did you do before TIP?
Before TIP, I was minding my own business at this county mental health clinic. That was my career. Before that, I worked with senior citizens in the mental health field. And before that, I worked in a inpatient psychiatric hospital, which was really an experience. So all of my professional career has been in mental health. Yes.
Great. When you, so you saw the need, but before you started TIP, was this ever anything you even imagined, or was it just kind of when you were in the throes of working with people that you figured out this is what had to happen?
The second, what you just said, Jordan, this was not planned at all.
Yeah.
And even when we started TIP initially, I had no experience in nonprofits. My intention was not to stick with this project. You know, it's like, okay, this will be a 6-month project and I'll get out of it, really, and go back to my regular job. That was the idea. I had no idea it would become really a life's work.
Yeah.
But when I saw it work, you know, I would say when not only I, but when we saw it work, I was sold. So it was kind of like the second founding. The first founding was just, okay, let's start this program. The second founding was, whoa, you know, when we started hearing that volunteers could actually go out, actually make contact with a client who accepted them.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know that. I mean, for all we knew, this is a stranger, right?
Right.
For all we knew, and for the police to pick up the radio and call, I mean, we didn't know any of that, right?
Yeah.
Now it's just
Yeah.
like, okay, we know.
Yep.
Uh, so it took me a while to realize we're onto something here.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have been foolish. I just did not want to let it go. And
Right.
June and I talk a lot about that. Like when
Yeah.
people leave TIP, you know, managers, and just go on with their life. It's like, I go, wow, I mean, why would anybody leave TIP? You know? There was no plan, no plan. And I do want to put in a plug for Luck. Really, I feel very humbled and grateful. Like if the police department weren't across the street, just coincidentally, right? There'd be no relationship there. And so,
Right.
so many doors have opened, and it's almost like I just walked through them. You know,
Okay.
it was almost like it was a program that was meant to be. It's like the big dispatcher in the sky said, all right, we need this TIP kind of program. I have this guy in mental health. I'll just open the doors and walk through. So I think there was a lot of luck involved, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the big dispatcher in the sky, so it makes sense that it would start there.
Yes. Yes. You're right, Jordan. The big dispatcher not only helps us out on TIP calls, but it really helped in kind of starting this whole TIP program. I mean, you know, if June didn't kind of come from wherever she came from into TIP.
Yep, and I'm going to ask her next.
Okay, well, I won't get into that, but that was like, okay, it's like, man, are we lucky here?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the big dispatcher has played a big part.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. So, June, how did you hear about TIP?
Wow. So I was stay-at-home mom at the time. I had just had baby number 3. And I saw an article in the local paper way back when everybody still read the papers. And it was about this program coming to town. And I thought, wow, they talked about working with people who were hurting and how police and fire were going to call. And I actually read the article and I handed it over to my husband, who's a homicide detective, and said, Greg, I think that you should take this training. I think it'd be really good for cops to know how to talk to people in crisis. And he read the article and slid it back to me and said, maybe you should go. So at the time, that was my first, my first step kind of back into the adult world after being at home doing daycare for so long. And like I said, I had a brand new baby. That's how I know how long I've been with Tip, because last week she turned 29. So she was an infant when I started. So I started as a volunteer. I walked into that training facility, and Wayne and Sue Peel were my trainers. And it was the training, the core of our training has remained the same, and how we've enhanced it and grown. That part has changed as it needed to with the sign of the times. So I started as a volunteer. Then they needed help with scheduling, and I had time to do that. So I would do the schedule. And I remember doing it with pencil and then driving it down to the fire dispatch center and knocking on the door and handing it to the firefighter. And then they had team leaders, and I had time to do that. And then a part-time position came open for crisis team manager. And that was about my time to phase out of daycare and start doing something else. So I did that. It was part-time for $1,000 a month. And I have to tell this story because anybody in TIP who's listening, our monthly meetings, my job interview by Wayne was to run the CE meeting. That's how he's laughing. That's how he interviewed me. So it was, I'm up against my peers, people who went through training with me. And now I'm all of a sudden being this leader and taking him through. And I remember a real controversial thing came up about our flyer. And in the flyer, there was a donation page. It seems so trivial now, Wayne, but I remember how big of a deal it was back then. And people were upset that it looked like we were asking for money after we helped people. And I had to kind of facilitate that. And the next day he said, he called me and said, well, if you were the crisis team manager, what would you have done? And I gave him my thing. Anyway, I got the job, so I had the right answer.
Oh my goodness. I think I would be crying if you said, okay, Jordan, it's your first day, do this CE meeting.
Yeah. Well, I think he wanted to see, I don't know, I'm speaking for you, Wayne, but you want to see if you can handle these groups. If there's some sort of leadership inside of you that you can kind of rise above, no matter how scared you are, to kind of facilitate these volunteers.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about that, June, but it wasn't a bad idea, right? I mean, it wasn't a bad idea, because that 3 hours is I think, most challenging part of a crisis manager's job.
Right. And that you shared that with me early on. And that's one thing I've shared with Jordan and my staff too, is that 3 hours every month is the most important part of your job.
Wayne, how did TIP get started in Portland?
Yes, I love telling this story. We won a major national award, and with it came $100,000 to replicate our program in places across the country.
Okay.
The NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, which of course reached millions of people at that time, picked up our program as a result of that award, and we were on the NBC Nightly News. As a result of that, a commissioner in Portland saw the piece, called up, left a message, and said, we want this program in Portland. The funny part of this is we were so naive. I mean, we had no experience replicating a program, that I said, okay, I'm going to fill out an application to send to this guy to see if Portland's pre-qualified. When I think about it now, it's so crazy. So I'm filling out this pre-application form, and a police friend of mine came in, and he said, "What are you doing?" I explained the situation to him, and he looked at me incredulously. And you could edit this part out if you want, Jordan. He just looked at me. He just looked at me and he said, "Get your ass up there." You know? And so I threw this application in the trash and got my ass up there. And which was a good move, because June and I, we all know now how difficult it is to get a city interested in TIP.
Yeah.
And here I'm gonna have them go through a rigmarole. So I got up there, of course, because this commissioner was for it. The Portland Fire Bureau kind of rolled out the red carpet, and they embraced the program from the beginning, the Portland Fire Bureau. And I remember part of my pre-qualification ridiculousness was to ask the city for money. So we didn't have any clue, you know, how much money. So I told the Portland Fire Bureau $10,000 to get started. So I went back to the hotel room, and here was an envelope on the door with $10,000 in it, or a check for $10,000 from the city of Portland, wherever. And I remember coming back high as a kite, you know, met with the board of directors, like, man, this is going to be a piece of cake. I got a $10,000 check here.
It was never that easy ever again.
Never, never. So in a real sense, Portland was one of the, embraced the program from the get-go. So we took our training, went up to Portland. June knows this story, wondering, again, we were so naive. Would, you know, maybe this was just a Southern California program. Would anybody, you know, I didn't even know, I don't think I'd ever been to Portland. I thought there were a bunch of lumberjacks or whatever. And I remember the first guy, you know what I'm going to say here, June. So we're waiting, is anybody going to walk into this first training academy? And here strolls in this big guy with a beard, plaid jacket, all my stereotype walked through that door. I figured, oh boy, this is, and he turned out to be a wonderful volunteer. Yeah. And so the room filled up. We did our first training early on, and this is key to a whole founding of a TIP chapter, is finding a leader. Who's going to take this tiger by the tail? And so June was a big part of that. She's been there ever since. And so that's how it happened, Jordan. Again, we went up there kind of not knowing what we were doing. And get back to luck or big dispatcher in the sky.
Yeah.
It all worked out.
Great. Thank you.
Surprisingly, you know, another tidbit there is Wayne, he's talking about Mike Christensen, and he actually spoke at Mike's funeral and talked about he is now officially the big dispatcher in the sky.
There you go. Yes. Yes. Mike was a wonderful guy. Of course, I stereotyped him as soon as he walked in the room.
June, is Mike the one you tell that story about walking around the cul-de-sac?
He's the one that walked into the bank after a bank robbery and saw all these young female, you know, tellers that had been traumatized. And we can't emphasize enough, like Wayne is saying, he's a big lumberjack of a guy. And he walked with a little bit of a gait because he had been in a bad accident. But he walked into that bank and he looked at all these girls that looked like his daughters, I'm sure, and he just put his arms out like this and went, "Come here!" like a hug was gonna fix everything.
Oh, that's funny. about Mike. So maybe Wayne first. What maybe is one of your favorite memories that sticks out to you over the last 35 years?
Yeah, that was the toughest thing for me to come up with,
Yeah.
Jordan, because there's so many. I remember being at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., receiving from the Attorney General a Victim Service Award on behalf of TIP, and that was memorable. I remember sitting with volunteers. We all gathered to watch us on the NBC Nightly News, and it came on, and we were like, "Man, we're great. This is hot stuff." And I remember, we've had an annual meeting almost from the beginning where all managers come together, and there's so many memories there. The one we had in Portland and around the country. So those annual meetings are memorable. The story I just told you about Portland, that's very clear in my memory. My first tip call.
Yeah, why don't you share that?
Well, it was to the beach in Oceanside. There was a drowning, and I was called. Now, this was again, I know I'm emphasizing our naivete. And so it was not only my first call, it was like one of TIP's first calls.
Okay, right.
We really didn't know what we were doing either. So it was at the beach, and I got to the beach, and the cop pointed me to the mother of the guy who drowned, sitting on a park bench alone. And that was memorable. It's like, okay, this is why we're doing this. This woman would be alone. So I went and sat by her side, and of course she didn't say anything for the longest time, so I needed to be silent, and we're looking out at the ocean as the sun was setting, and she didn't want to leave the beach, but it started raining, and all these other people, probably 50 other people showed up, other volunteers showed up. We had to figure out, well, how to protect her from the rain while keeping her at the beach, and somebody had the idea of commandeering a condo that was there, which we did.
Wow.
So they, while we were there, they never did find the body, which was tough for her. And we all went back to her house. And so that was my first tip call. And I remember it, clearly to this
Wow.
day. Yeah.
How about you, June? Do you remember your first tip call?
I do. It's not it's not as routine as Wayne's, but it was a gunshot by suicide, and it was a 30-year-old guy who lived with his mom. And I remember all through training that they told me I wouldn't have to see anything bad, and pick what you look at. And I remember getting to that house, and the medical examiner told me his sister had gone by the door when she was taking care of mom to tell him. She always threw the door open to say, "I'm leaving, she's all yours now." And when she threw open the door, she had seen that. And when I got there, they couldn't get her out of the room. And I'm like, and that's where he did it. And I can't tell you to this day what it looked like, because I opened the door and I walked in and I made eye contact with her, and I called her by name and said, "Let's come out." And we went out. I didn't look. I don't remember seeing. I remember that because it sticks in my head, because when I got home, my husband asked me, "What did it look like?" I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "Because Stephen King always says." And I'm like, I didn't. When I think back at it now, in a small bedroom, a gunshot, it was probably horrible. But I honestly, I did not look. I concentrated on her as I was told to, and walked her out.
Wow.
And a lot of that was process of her mom wanting to say goodbye and the adult siblings. And it was pretty powerful. And I kept coming back. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So June, you just mentioned Greg, your husband, and he is a law enforcement officer. So how has TIP or TIP training, TIP together. How has that helped you in what you do, or working with your family?
Well, I think when you have one foot on both sides, providing that emotional support and then seeing what they go through, I can say that I have a bigger awareness of what emergency response looks like, especially on the law enforcement side, being married to Greg. But I can also say it's probably done more good for him and his friends and his colleagues picking up those things that he hears me say on the phone, and just listening, and mostly not judging, but realizing they don't have to have all the answers, which they're trained to do. So I think it's made a big impact on both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne, what do you think are the ingredients of a really good TIP volunteer?
Number one, and this is, of course, basic and obvious, compassion,
Mm-hmm.
right? The second I would say is calm under pressure. Because however way you look at these TIP calls, there's pressure. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's no way. You got to, first of all, find the place,
Yep.
right? I mean, you got to get there quickly. People are looking at you. So calm under pressure would be the second. Third, self-awareness. You know, we talk a lot in TIP about leaving yourself in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So being aware of who you are, what you'd like to do, and not doing it. So self-awareness. And finally, street smarts. So having total situational awareness, looking out for danger, protecting yourself, being diplomatic with emergency people. So all those street smarts, I think, is the fourth.
Yeah.
But people have talked about what's the profile. To me, there's a mysterious and unknown ingredient. I mean, I've been so wrong watching people come through that door and say, oh, no way, no way. Even through the training, oh, this person, you know, is going to be great. And they drop out, like, you know, before their first call.
Yep.
And this person, oh boy, they're going to be shaky. And they turn out to be a super. I don't know if that's been your
Oh, yeah,
experience,
absolutely.
Jordan. So, I mean, I'd like to give you these 4 qualities, but anybody I think who thinks, you know, they can predict if this person's going to work out, I think is wrong. I don't know. Is that your experience, Joan?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. If we knew what that thing was that we were looking for, we would just put it in the ad when we're recruiting.
Right. No,
I don't know. I don't know what it is, you know.
Either do I.
I think it's a combination of everything you just said. It's having the willingness and compassion. It's having street smarts, because we can't keep you safe. It's being able to be self-aware, to get ourselves out of the way so people aren't bringing their own story. It's a little bit of all of that, and it's the right combination that makes people successful.
Yes, yes. Is that your experience, Jordan? I know you're the interviewer.
Yeah.
Have you figured it out?
Yeah. I wish. I think the only thing, I think it's encompassed in everything you both just said, but I also think, you know, flexibility, we can't stress that enough with our volunteers, you know, being flexible for whatever that might mean, you know, like you might get rerouted, you might get canceled, you might actually work with these other people instead of the mom who they told you, and being okay with that no matter what happens, not just so stringent that you have to do what you were set out to do the first time.
That's a good point. Yes.
Yeah. Wayne, when did you feel like TIP really made it?
Never. I mean, no, I mean, there's been milestones where I say, wow, this is great. We're making progress. After we started Portland, which was the first program outside of California, I felt that was a milestone. So there's been a series of milestones. When we won that award I keep referring to, and $100,000, that was kind of a validation of who we were, or who we are. But you know, there's a lot of places out there that don't have TIP. So the way I look at it is, job has just begun, really. It's been 35 years, but I don't by any means feel like we've arrived.
Mhm.
We've made progress,
Mhm.
but it's just still nose to the grindstone, right?
Yeah.
Still getting our ass up there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
right? Yeah.
Now, another highlight, Wayne, that I think I have heard you share, and it's just reminding me because I can see it over your shoulder, is the biography magazine.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. You're right, Joan, that biography magazine, because it was on every newsstand. It was
Right. Well, and we were listed about the angels right next to Osama bin Laden.
right.
You know, and that was
Yeah.
that was all the world right then, you know.
Wow.
And I think back, and I don't want to take over your interview, Jordan, but
No, yeah.
of just watching Wayne lead this group. And when he says we haven't gotten there, it's because there's been so many changes. So when you think, he mentioned earlier that the annual meetings, it's like, I think the first annual meeting was around his dining room table.
Mhm.
You know, and then we thought we were hot stuff when we moved to the fire station in Vista, and we were around
Right.
there, remember?
Yes.
And then annual meetings got to be a really big thing, and we tried to do them around people's heroes with heart until we thought, man, the managers who are trying to host this meeting and put on an event, that was
Right.
way too much.
Mhm.
So then we kind of scaled back. And I think one thing, and I don't know if you had any idea how powerful that was going to be when you started it, but was everybody sharing their successes, which turned out to be what works.
Mhm.
And it's what everybody, every chapter across the country, whether big or small, we come waiting because our parameters are, what are you doing that's been really great that another chapter can duplicate and be successful there?
Yes.
Because we are all different. And, you know, we went from being, you know, Wayne having to manage all of us and our staff to then all of us being encouraged to become our own nonprofits, which is really great for us, but it puts a whole new leadership on him because now he has all these little businesses that he's trying to
That
keep.
are all independent.
Yeah, right. And the one, you know, the thing that keeps us together, and I spent a lot of time when I worked for TIP National doing that, is making sure everybody, imagine that, I'm just saying it, is a rule follower. That's, you know, my go-to name. That we're all doing the same thing, that we're protecting the reputation of TIP and ourselves, because as we've shared, we see police chiefs and fire chiefs retire and pick up somewhere else. And if they have a bad taste in their mouth about where they came from, it's not going to go well here. Luckily, that hasn't happened. It's all been positive when they pop up in other places. When I think back about what it was like, I mean, honestly, Wayne didn't share this when he started, but when he said he started in county mental health, I love when he shares the story about literally being in a trailer in the parking lot of a county building, because it kind of puts a whole new, you know, you're picturing him walking down, you know, out to go do it. I think about how many times, Wayne, early in the years where you're literally trying to have some significant conversations with important people and Clancy was barking, you know, and he shows one picture where he was like literally in the shower with the door closed. So, and, you know, soon after that, then it was Sherlock who wanted his attention. I mean, we've all grown with how we do this. And we've joked a lot, like, boy, if the people we were talking to could really see that we're sitting in the garage, you know, up next to the wash machine, trying to do this, or just how things have changed in training. You know, when I had a big celebration, and I remember you said to me, why are we, Jordan, I don't mean to bring up bad memories for you. Yeah. Why are we celebrating 17 years? And he said, what's significant?
This story.
And it was a
I
graduation.
didn't say that.
You know, I mean, it was like, you actually said, I love the fact that it's not 20, it's not 25. We all needed a reason to party around then and to celebrate something. So we decided to celebrate. And at that point, you and I kind of had a discussion about what it used to be like. And we shared because, you know, when TIP first started, remember there were no cell phones 35 years ago. There were no cell phones 28 years ago.
Exactly.
And when they finally came in, they were those great big 3-pound bricks
Right.
we had to carry around. And we went from part of our training academy literally was having a night learning how to read the Thomas Guide, because that's how you knew where you were going. If I said that right now to our group of volunteers, the ones that are under a certain age would go, what are you talking about?
What's the Thomas Guide?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And we talk about, a lot of people don't know, because there's not very many out there anymore, phone booths. We really knew where all of the safe places were to go make a phone call in a phone booth. And we carried around change in our kit. And people were like, phone, like you stopped at a 7-Eleven, weren't you afraid of getting shot? Or I'm like, no, it's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And Jordan, you know, just from the time you've been here, that now we require people to have a smartphone and internet access. I mean, it was just 29 years ago, it was just an added bonus if people had emails. Now we do everything electronically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much easier, right? Technology has made it
Yeah.
so much easier.
You know, I think of when I started, you know, 10, well, almost, I guess, 11 years ago now, but when I became a dispatcher and I'd be out with my friends, I'd have the pager with me. And finally, one of my friends goes, Jordan, 1887 called and they want their pagers back. You know? Like, it was just so archaic, you know, from the 1800s even.
Right. Right.
And you know, it was what, maybe 5 years ago, June, we got the app on our phone to use as our pagers now.
So, and people have asked before, what's the biggest stumbling block? And I remember that Wayne and I had a few laughs over this too, is when we started the teen program and the parents were all in arms that their teens were getting pagers because people were going to think they were drug dealers if they carried around a pager, you know? So,
yeah.
Or I remember, you know, Wayne, just your thoughts about starting a teen program. I mean, you were all supportive of it, but when we talked about training them, you were like, well, what am I supposed to say?
Right. Not having teens myself. No, I was skeptical about the whole thing, but one of the joys for me of TIP had been watching these young people just do their thing. I mean, really, and grow into it, go on, you know, to medical school. And so bringing young people. So you're right, June, you're reminding me of how much change we've been through over the years.
And I think,
one thing, go ahead. Well, one thing I think we did right is chapters became independent. We are all different. We kept that training academy standardized. Yeah. And I really think that was a good move. You know, and chapters all seem to appreciate it. Nobody fights it, but it gives trainers from different chapters an opportunity to travel around to other chapters to do the training. So do you agree, June, that training academy is so core to keeping us together? And
well, that's, and I don't think anybody challenges it, Wayne, because there's not a better way to do it. I mean, we figured it out. And now that you have a little bit less responsibility of running a day-to-day chapter, you have all this time, which is your best forte, is writing manuals and keeping us up to date on things. I mean, you coached us and supported us through the whole tele-tip and then the 30-day follow-up. And I think that's, you know, that's one of the things you're really good at. And chapters don't, I think chapters appreciate it instead of fighting it, because it's done. We've proven, I mean, 35 years, this is what works. So
yeah. The training, I think, is one of the best things we do. You know, we've learned along the way, documented it, finds itself into the manuals. So
I know when June starts training, she always says, you know, this is my favorite part of being, you know, the executive director here or the national trainer is the training academy. And it's obvious, you know, she's a great trainer. Wayne's a great trainer, clearly. And even just when I sit in the back and process paperwork and watch all of our new trainees to see if they're going to make the cuts, essentially, I hear something new in the training every single time. You know,
Mhm.
something different stands out to me every time. And now I've sat through countless academies, you know, and every time I walk away thinking, wow, that really resonated this time for whatever was
Mhm.
going on, or wow, this really stood out, or wow, this really hit home today for whatever
Mhm.
reason. And I'm sure that every trainee is having those aha moments the whole time.
Mhm.
But for me, you know, who's sat through it a million times now, you guys even more, it still is fascinating to me how powerful it is.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. And I think for every success that we can sit and say we've had, we don't talk about all the things that we wish we would have done different, but we learn
Mhm.
from those. I mean, things, you know, some guidelines that we went on early on with TIP, we've changed. You know, I
Mhm.
think when I'll just share mine. When we were brand new, I was like, boy, if you had a heartbeat and you had a little bit of interest, you were in, you know?
Got to fill that schedule, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now I think it's kind of common across the country that we're a little bit picky about who comes in, because we need you to be dependable. And when Jordan was doing these interviews with current volunteers and asking them, it was interesting to hear some of them answer that question. Like they have high expectations. It's not just a fly by night, you show up if you want to. You're like, they expect us to be there. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
And that was
Yes.
something that, you know, you just
We
threw
had to
out there
learn.
right from the
Yeah.
beginning. Yes, we have high expectations, and this is why.
Mhm.
So,
Oh yeah,
which make,
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've made our mistakes along the way. But I think we've learned and corrected, and you know, through this pandemic. I mean, I really haven't been in. I've been just kind of more of an observer, but watching the resiliency and the ability to adapt of these tip chapters is incredible,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The trainings with the Zoom meetings, the going out with PPE. I mean, all that
Yeah.
speaks highly of the organization, I think,
Yeah.
and to the leadership of these chapters.
Because I think all of us, when it hit, we're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Right.
And we've overcome, and we keep on, and everybody has a little bit different flavor, but the mission keeps going.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so just some final parting questions. Wayne, what do you think the magic of TIP is?
I like that term you use, magic, because this shouldn't work when you think about it. Oh, we're
Right.
going to send just this really person off the street. They have some training, put them
Yep.
into these complex, intense situations. They have no, like when I did mental health, we had a history on people, right? We had a chart before they ever walked through the door. Volunteers just like thrown into the situation, right?
Yep.
Stranger. I mean, I have friends who shake their head and say, how does this damn thing work? And even lawyer friends who wonder, like, how come nobody, you're sending people out at 3 a.m.? Really? So when you
Yep.
say magic,
Yeah.
there is some magic here. And I think it is, you take an ordinary person, you ask them without an agenda, without pay, without a uniform, and you just say, go and care for that person right now at the worst time in their life. Magic happens. I really think so. It's so simple. We don't load volunteers up with lots of policies and procedures. And it all comes down to our saying and tips, citizens helping citizens in crisis. And I think when you have that pure motive, you know, it keeps us safe. I think even people who want to fight the volunteer go like this person's here for me. You know, it just, so I think that's the magic. Pure angels going out and helping people who are right away, not
Yep.
the next day. I think magic happens. So I like your word magic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you see magic? You must, because you use the word.
Yeah.
All the time. I mean,
Oh,
every
okay.
day, every day I think, yeah, there is. There's, it's that big dispatcher in the sky. It's, serendipity. It's all these things that happen that align perfectly for TIP to be what it is, for our volunteers to
Yeah.
go out, for people to let, like you said, just really a person off the street going to God knows who, at God knows where, at God knows what time, to just be there.
Yeah. And it's, I must have been to 1,000 CE meetings. There's not a continuing education meeting that I don't go to and hear a call report where I don't go, wow, where did that person come up with that? Here you have a volunteer who works as a car mechanic or in Safeway, and they go into these situations, say things, do things that I would never think of in a million years.
Yep.
That's the magic. It's like, where did they come up? Where did this lumberjack come up with that? Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
Yep.
no no PhD, no mental health training. Excuse me. So I'm in awe of these volunteers who come up with this magic.
Yeah. Good. Thanks. June, what about you? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just would ditto that. If I knew what it was, Jordan, and we talk about it all the time, it's like, it just seems that the right volunteer shows up at the right call at the right time. And I think we've learned how to be good leaders, or as our good friend Lou says, we love them in and we love them out. If it's not a good match, it doesn't mean they're bad. We just love them out. Sometimes that happens, but there is just, Wayne feels this way too. This really doesn't feel like work. It feels like what we're supposed to be doing. It feels like a calling, if you will. I don't wake up and go, oh gosh, who's going to die today and how are we going to get somebody there? I literally am so grateful for the opportunity to have a little bit of a fingerprint on the lives of people who are going out and doing this work. And I still enjoy going out myself. So.
Makes me a little emotional, when we've been doing these volunteer videos for our heroes in a couple weeks, I've been sitting there with our camera guy. We've been asking them, why do you think TIP's important? What does TIP mean to you? What have you learned? And June, laughing and I think proud at the same time, because I'm sitting there behind the scene, just
almost like, crying.
Yeah, like just beaming, listening to what our volunteers are saying about TIP. And I knew that they felt all these ways, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. But to hear them put it out there and say it on camera and really think about it it's just made me feel so proud and emotional listening to them.
To be a part of it.
Along those lines, Jordan, I think one of the things I admire about volunteers is they go out into these unfixable situations.
Yep.
And are willing just to be there and are willing to be helpless, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy being helpless. We want to fix it. We want to make it okay. I think that's one of the challenges of being a volunteer. Yeah.
Okay, so summing this up, June, can you sum TIP up in 3 words?
Oh gosh, I think I will piggyback on what Wayne said earlier. Compassion, self-awareness, and dedication.
Wayne, what about you? Anything?
Just be there. Now, if I had 4 words,
yeah,
I'd steal what I got from Portland. I think it was from the Portland Fire Bureau, Joan.
Yep.
Always ready, always there.
Yep.
I mean, but that's 4
it.
words. That's 4 words.
I'll let you have 4 words, Wayne. You deserve it.
All right.
Good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. You're a great interviewer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much. This has been, I've loved listening to both of you share and really talking about how TIP started and where we are and just your thoughts and reflections over the years, and Wayne, how outstanding you are on founding this program, and a great leader yourself by far. And June, thank you to you for running our affiliate here, and of course an outstanding leader too. So thank you to both of you. You've made my day.
Great.